We're here with Dr. Tim Ball, climatologist. We're going to get right into it. What is global warming? What's the theory behind it?
Well, the theory, and it's strictly a theory, and that's an important point, is that back in about the early 80s, somebody said, look, CO2 is a greenhouse gas that traps energy escaping to the sun, and if it increases in the atmosphere, the temperature will go up, and that it will increase because humans are producing CO2. And therefore, we're going to end up with runaway global warming, and that's where the whole thing began. It's dying right now. They've switched from global warming to climate change because the temperature is going down, but the CO2 continues to rise. And this is what Huxley called the great bane of science, a lovely hypothesis destroyed by an ugly fact.
But one of the things they always say is they connect the term pollution to CO2, to carbon dioxide. It must be the most dangerous, poisonous gas in the atmosphere. And how much of the atmosphere is it?
Well, that's a very good question. Of the greenhouse gases, which are a fraction of the total gases in the atmosphere, it's less than 4% of the greenhouse gases. And they're less than 0.1% of the total gases in the atmosphere. And then the human portion of that, of course, is actually immeasurably small. That is, that you can't distinguish the amount of human CO2 put up compared to natural. So, of course, the question that rises out of that, why the focus on CO2, which is not only a fraction of the greenhouse gases, but such a minuscule part of the total weather system out there. It's almost like taking you and picking one little mole on you and say, this represents you. That's what's going on here.
The belief now is that there's a scientific consensus. This is repeated over and over again. That man-made CO2 is causing the globe to warm.
Yeah, well, the word consensus, of course, started to come in with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Here's 3,000 scientists, now down to 2,500. In fact, originally it was 6,000. Well, here's a consensus. Consensus is a political word because consensus is important in politics. Even if it doesn't necessarily represent the truth, it's what the politician has to deal with, is what the people think is the truth. Whereas in science, it doesn't work at all because consensus is not a scientific fact. And as Einstein said, you've only got to find one flaw in your scientific theory, the whole theory is gone. So consensus has been used once the whole climate change issue became political.
Back up a little bit, because the actual mandate of the UN's panel on climate change, what is their mandate? I think this is an important point to clarify.
It's a very, very important point, and it's an important point for all politics and understanding of how governments work. And it's through the terms of reference that the politician controls what's looked at. Now, you asked me about the IPCC. Morris Strong, who wrote the terms of reference for that agency, the first definition, or first of all, the definition of climate change was you only look at human causes. Ignore what nature's doing, which of course is ludicrous. And then one of the final terms of reference was, we're going to write a summary with a completely different group. The science side is, science reports put aside. The summary goes out to the public. And then the summary goes back to the scientists with the instructions to make sure your summary or your science report agrees with our summary. So by controlling the terms of reference and the IPCC, this is how Strong controlled it.
This is important for people to understand. The only thing that the UN's panel on climate looks at are man-made causes, period, full stop.
Exactly.
They don't even have a mandate to look at the sun or other theories that come up.
No, the only way they mention them, and by the way, in the most recent report, 2007, two major changes in the sun that we know cause temperature change and climate change are not even mentioned. So, for example, and they can get away with it because most people don't understand even the fundamental science. So, for example, the orbit of the Earth around the sun is they're told it's elliptical, but in fact it's going from almost circular to full ellipse and back again. We've known that for 150 years. It's still not in their computer models. So, they got away with this by focusing only on the human causes, and that, of course, allows them then to focus on CO2. The most important greenhouse gas, water vapor, 95% by volume, ignore it.
Ignore it completely.
Ignore it completely.